Hello, welcome to Thought for the Day. I'm sure that many of you will know that today is the anniversary of the UK's first lockdown and a national day of reflection, with events organised to reflect on our collective loss, support those who've been bereaved and hope for a brighter future. You may have already taken part in one or more of these online events and perhaps heard church bells ringing at 12 o'clock. Marie Curie, with others, and the Good Grief Festival have organised these series of events throughout today and have called for everyone to light candles in windows or stand outside with torches at 8 p.m. this evening. We are all only too aware of the challenges and loss of life that COVID has brought to our families, our communities and our country. Too many lives lost, cut short, but behind the statistics and whatever the cause, every death has been devastating for those of us left behind. Vaccinations and social distancing, along with each of us taking care and following guidance, have begun to bring hope that we may return to normality soon, whatever that means for each one of us. But there is no doubt there are still challenging times ahead, and inevitably the death toll will continue to rise. Today, it is hoped, will give us time to pause and think about the unprecedented loss that we're facing and how we can continue to support each other, family, friends and neighbours through the grief and challenges which we and others face now in the years to come. Death has always been a topic close to home, often not spoken about, and often thought, well, we'll just get over it. And in the face of our experience with this pandemic, we are all learning that it's not quite like that. And grief is handled in a very personal way. There's no formula or timescale, but often being given permission to talk about it and how one feels is an important step to coming to terms with what has happened. Fortunately, there are now more places to enable this to happen, from GPs to charities to church faith centres and friends and family, and it's seen as normal, not something as being strange. What is often seen as the shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept, from John 11 verse 35, is part of the story of Jesus and the death of his friend Lazarus. When Jesus heard that his friend had died, he cried. 3 days later he visited the tomb and commanded Lazarus to come out. We might wonder what all this means and whether it matters. It matters because Christians have some very distinctive and some very special things to say about death, about both real physical death and about the other deaths, the little deaths, the endless changes and chances of life and losses that we seem constantly to be experiencing at this time. Lazarus was dead. Maybe Jesus could have helped if he'd arrived earlier, but not now. Death ruled over Lazarus. When we Christians are at our best, we look at death with the eyes of the bereaved and of Jesus, and we see that what they see. The first thing they see is the reality, the force, the sheer power of death. And Jesus was shaken. He was deeply troubled. He wept. There is nothing light-hearted or glibber here. Death is real. At its worst, Christianity has tried to deny this and has been ashamed of the tears of Jesus. At its worst, Christianity has said that our faith means that death isn't all that important, that it really doesn't matter, and that grief, the real life-shattering, gut-tearing grief that hurts so terribly, is somehow not fully Christian. And we have been wrong. Death is very real, and it's very powerful, and if we don't say this first, then we're not telling the truth. The tears of Jesus sanctify every tear, and his deeply troubled spirit makes holy our own grief, pain and fear in the face of death. Death is real, and it's powerful, and it hurts, and it destroys. The real point to this well-known story is not that Lazarus came back, but that Jesus is the Lord of the living and the dead. The real point is that the voice of Jesus carries. It carries even through the walls of the grave, and his word is the clearest word, and the strongest word, and the last word. That's the good news that we have. Christians see that the world does not see. We see that the word of God and the purpose of God and the love of God cannot be stopped and will not be stopped, not even by the strongest and the worst that the world has to offer. The promises of new life is not a promise that we are in charge and that we will get what we want. The promise is much better than that. The promise is that God in Jesus Christ is Lord even of the dead, even of death itself. And that goes, what goes says, that's what we Christians see. Alas, we can see no further, we can see no more, but we can see that far. Naturally, we want details, we want guarantees, we want some power and some control in all of this. We want to know what it's like, but we don't get any of that, not in the face of physical death. Instead, in the face of all the deaths that make up our lives, we are told first that death is stronger than we are, and that we have no knowledge about it and no power over death. And then we are told that our God is Lord, Lord of all, Lord of life and death. So we must choose. Whatever deaths are before us, we must choose. We must choose to despair or to trust, to give up or to go on, to abandon hope or to let go in faith. And that choice can be terribly hard, more than at any other time. The reality of death, death in whatever form, is a call to trust. We see what the world sees, and yet we see more. We see that the word of Jesus has power. Come out, the Lord calls. Come out into a different life, into new life. Come out into a life unknown and unexplained. Come out in trust and in hope. Even more at this time in our church's calendar, approaching Easter, we should see that in Jesus Christ we have the promise of life eternal. If you have been listening, thank you. And may God go with you.
In my wrestling and in my doubts, in my failures, you won't walk out. Your great love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled sea. Whoa, you are the peace in my troubled sea. In the silence, you won't let go. In the questions, your truth will hold. Your great love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled sea. Whoa, you are the peace in my troubled sea. My lighthouse, shining in the darkness, I will follow you. Oh, my lighthouse, I will trust the promise. You will carry me safe to shore, safe to shore, safe to shore, safe to shore. I won't fear what tomorrow brings. With each morning I'll rise and sing. My God's love will lead me through. You are the peace